1621. The Dutch East India Company stands as the world's first true multinational corporation. 6.4 million guilders in capital, 50,000 employees, a private army of 10,000 soldiers, the power to wage war, mint coins, and execute criminals. In a single year, it will kill or enslave 90% of an entire civilization. 2,800 Bandanese will die. 1,700 will be enslaved. 15,000 people reduced to fewer than 1,000 survivors, all for a spice that grows on a handful of volcanic islands smaller than Central Park. This isn't corporate greed gone wrong. This isn't colonialism's accidental excess. This is what happens when nations mistake commodity monopolies for sustainable wealth, when corporations confuse market dominance with invincibility, when an empire built on spice discovers too late that you can't eat nutmeg when your treasury is empty. I'm not here to moralize about imperialism. I'm here to examine how a commercial enterprise that pioneered modern capitalism, that invented the joint stock company, that created the Amsterdam Stock Exchange, managed to bankrupt itself, not through failure, but through success. This is the story of how the spice wars didn't just destroy the Bandanese. They destroyed the Dutch economy permanently. The monopoly that controlled the world's flavor. 1599 to 1621. The Dutch don't just dominate the spice trade. They are the spice trade. The Verenigde Oostindische Compagnie - the VOC - functions as what historians call the corporate blueprint for capitalism. When European markets demand exotic flavors, they buy from Amsterdam. When investors want guaranteed returns, they purchase VOC shares. When governments need a model for overseas expansion, they study Dutch methods. The numbers tell the story. A pound of nutmeg purchased in the Banda Islands for less than 1 English penny sells in Europe for over £2 sterling. That's a markup exceeding 60,000%, not 600%, not 6,000%, 60,000%. The Dutch can achieve a profit margin of 7,500% on each nutmeg shipment. That's not trade, that's extraction of pure value. The Banda Islands aren't just profitable, they're irreplaceable. Nutmeg and mace grow nowhere else on Earth. 15,000 Bandanese have controlled this trade for centuries, selling to Chinese, Persian, Arab, and later Portuguese merchants. The volcanic soil creates a spice so potent, so aromatic, that Europeans believe it can cure plague, enhance virility, and preserve meat. During the Black Death, prices explode. A bag of nutmeg worn around the neck supposedly wards off disease. Medical quacks prescribe it for everything. The wealthy sprinkle it on food as status symbols. The VOC sees an opportunity, not just to participate in this trade, to own it completely. But here's what nobody's calculating. Building a monopoly requires violence on an unprecedented scale. Maintaining it requires constant military expenditure. And enforcing it requires destroying the very people who know how to grow the spice. It's a bet that Europeans can replace 15,000 years of indigenous agricultural knowledge. That bet is about to fail spectacularly. The infrastructure that required genocide, early 1600s. European powers converge on Southeast Asia. Portuguese, Spanish, English, Dutch all competing for spices. The English East India Company establishes itself in 1600. The VOC forms in 1602 as a merger of 12 competing Dutch companies. Both want the Banda Islands. Both want the monopoly. The Bandanese have different plans. They're expert traders who've managed this resource for generations. They sign contracts with the Dutch in 1602. Then they keep selling to the English, the Portuguese, whoever offers better prices. To the Bandanese, this is basic commerce. To the Dutch, this is breach of contract. To historians, this is probably a fundamental misunderstanding of what the Dutch contract actually meant. The VOC needs control, total control. In 1609, Dutch Admiral Peter Verhoef arrives with a fleet. He demands exclusive trading rights. The Bandanese lure him and 46 of his men to negotiations. Then they massacre them all. Verhoef's second in command? A young ambitious officer named Jan Pieterszoon Cohen. He barely escapes with his life. He never forgets. Fast forward to 1621. Cohen is now Governor-General of the VOC. He's spent 12 years nursing a grudge. He's spent 12 years convincing the Herons Aventian - the 17 gentlemen who run the company - that only military conquest will secure the monopoly. He gets his chance. February 1621. Cohen personally leads a fleet of 19 ships carrying 1,600 Dutch soldiers, 300 Javanese prisoners, 100 Japanese mercenary samurai, and 286 slaves. His mission? Subjugate the Banda Islands, populate them with other people. His words to the Herons Aventian: to adequately deal with this matter, it is necessary to once again subjugate Banda and populate it with other people. Think about what that means. The company has authorized ethnic cleansing as corporate policy. The board of directors in Amsterdam has approved genocide as a business strategy. This isn't rogue agents going too far. This is institutional violence planned at the highest level. The massacre that wasn't worth the cost. March through May 1621. Cohen's forces systematically destroy Bandanese society. They claim a chandelier falls in a mosque by accident. They accuse the Bandanese of signaling an attack. They use this pretext to launch full-scale war. The Bandanese resist. They fight from the hills. They launch night raids. They refuse to surrender. So the Dutch implement a scorched earth policy. They burn villages. They destroy boats. They kill anyone who resists. Those who flee. Many choose death over capture. Hundreds jump from cliffs at Celemon and Lantoir rather than submit to Dutch rule. Others starve to death hiding in the forests. April 21st, 1621. Cohen's soldiers torture villagers into confessing a conspiracy. The evidence? Non-existent. The result? Cohen captures 789 village leaders, dash the Orang Kaya, dash along with their families. Most are deported to Batavia and enslaved. May 8th, 1621. 44. Orang Kaya are put on trial. All are convicted of breaking contracts and conspiring against the VOC. All are sentenced to death. Japanese mercenaries execute them. They decapitate each leader. They quarter the bodies. They display the severed heads and body parts on bamboo stakes as public warnings. The violence continues for months. By the time Cohen declares victory, the statistics are catastrophic. 2,800 Bandanese killed by sword, starvation, or disease. 1,700 enslaved and deported. Unknown numbers dead from jumping off cliffs. Several hundred escaped to nearby islands. Total population before conquest, 15,000. Total population remaining, fewer than 1,000. 93% of the Bandanese civilization destroyed. For Nutmeg. The economics that didn't add up. The VOC has its monopoly. Now it faces a problem nobody anticipated. The Bandanese knew how to grow nutmeg. The Bandanese knew when to harvest. The Bandanese knew how to process mace. The Bandanese knew which trees produced the best yields. That knowledge? Gone. Dead. Enslaved. Fled to other islands. The Dutch solution? Import slave labor. Bring in workers from Java, Makassar, Malaya, China, Bugis, Moluccas, Bhutan. Establish 70 large plantations on Banda and Ai Islands. Force production. Control output. Burn excess nutmeg after bumper harvests to keep prices high. Soak seeds in lime so nobody can plant them without authorization. Uproot groves on other islands to prevent competition. Impose the death penalty for smuggling seedlings. The profits are enormous, for decades. But here's what the VOC board doesn't calculate. Military occupation is expensive. Maintaining forts throughout Southeast Asia costs millions of guilders annually. Paying soldiers, supplying ships, fighting rival powers, suppressing rebellions, preventing smuggling. The overhead keeps growing. By 1675, company officials notice financial problems. By 1693, deficits appear. The board dismisses them as temporary fluctuations. They convince themselves profits will return. After all, trade within Asia remains strong. In the 18th century, the VOC averages over 4 million guilders annually in Asian trade. In the 1740s and 50s, revenues exceed 700,000 guilders per year. That's more than the best years of the 17th century. But the deficits keep growing because the VOC refuses to adapt. The company maintains the same capital base, 6.4 million guilders, for 200 years. Instead of issuing new shares to raise funds, it borrows. Short-term loans, long-term debt. By 1780, total capital net of debt stands at 62 million guilders. Sounds healthy. It's not. The competition that couldn't be stopped. The monopoly starts cracking. 1751. A Frenchman named Pierre Poivre, working from Pondicherry, arrives in Manila with one goal: steal nutmeg seedlings. He finds allies. The Spanish governor of the Philippines hates the VOC. The Sultan of Jolo hates the VOC. They help him. March 1770. A French clerk named Provost successfully smuggles 400 nutmeg trees and 70 rooted clove trees off Patani Island. 150 years of monopoly broken by one determined Frenchman. The VOC tries to maintain control. They burn more groves. They tighten restrictions. They execute smugglers. It doesn't matter. The monopoly is finished. Meanwhile, the British adapt. The English East India Company pivots. They focus on tea, coffee, textiles, sugar, silk, porcelain. They open shops in Guangzhou to trade directly with China. In 1784, Parliament passes the Commutation Act, slashing tea taxes to 1/8 of previous levels. Tea imports double, then double again. By the 1790s, British tea trade volume exceeds the combined total of Dutch, Danish, Swedish, and French traders. The VOC can't compete. The company is too large, too bureaucratic, too committed to spices. Employee costs soar, corruption explodes, company officials steal from the treasury and hide wealth in Dutch and Batavian accounts. The board tries reforms. Multiple committees form, plans are drafted, nothing works. The company is too rigid to change. Then disaster strikes. December 1780. The Fourth Anglo-Dutch War begins. British naval forces attack VOC settlements across Asia. They capture ships, they seize cargo, they destroy trading posts. Trade grinds to a halt. Sales plummet from 21 million guilders to less than 6 million guilders in the first year. The VOC suspends debt payments. Reputation collapses. No investors will lend. By 1785, government interest payments alone create crushing financial burden. The company submits desperate requests for assistance to Parliament. Reform committees multiply. The States General establishes a fifth department to design rescue plans. Then a National Committee for East India Affairs. Nothing succeeds. The collapse nobody could prevent, 1795. The French invade the Dutch Republic. They install a puppet government, 1796. The VOC board is forced to resign. Management transfers to a government committee, January 1st, 1800. The VOC charter is revoked. 2 centuries of operation end. Final tally? Total debt, 134.8 million guilders. That's roughly equivalent to 58 times the company's original capital. The debt is so massive it overwhelms the Kingdom of the Netherlands for decades. The government spends the next century trying to pay it off. The British take over most VOC possessions after the Napoleonic Wars. The English East India Company absorbs Dutch infrastructure. Manhattan, which the Dutch traded to England in 1667 in exchange for Rhun Island to secure their nutmeg monopoly, it becomes the financial capital of the world. Rhun Island? Population today, approximately 2,000. No infrastructure. Poor telecommunications. Forgotten by history. The lesson nobody learned. The VOC pioneered modern capitalism. It invented the joint stock company. It created limited liability for shareholders. It established the first major stock exchange. It paid dividends averaging 18% for nearly 200 years, and it destroyed itself through success. The company achieved its monopoly. It controlled nutmeg production globally for over a century. It generated enormous wealth, but it confused market dominance with financial sustainability. It prioritized maintaining monopoly over adapting to changing markets. It chose borrowing over issuing new equity. It spent fortunes on military occupation while rivals focused on trade efficiency. This is a story about the dangers of confusing short-term profits with long-term value creation, about mistaking monopoly power for competitive advantage, about believing that violence can replace innovation as a business strategy. The VOC didn't fail because it was evil, though it was. It failed because it built an empire on a foundation that couldn't last. Monopolies require constant enforcement. Enforcement requires constant spending. Spending eventually exceeds income. And when the bills come due, all the nutmeg in the world can't save you. This is what happens when you confuse owning a resource with understanding how to create sustainable value from it. When you mistake eliminating competition for building competitive advantage. When you believe that controlling supply is more important than serving demand efficiently. The Dutch spent 200 years learning this lesson. The Bandanese spent 1 year dying from it. And the world's financial markets spent the next 3 centuries pretending it never happened.